T's, we see a spacing here that I brought up with these particular T's. You can see how Jack's T's and the space between them and the relation between the stems are identical with the Zodiac here from K8. Also from this particular communication, actually looks like it's identically the same as that one. Okay, way to go. I do note that the crossing of the T's between Jack and the Zodiac are identical. They tend to look like plus marks, slant to the same degree, crossbar right where you would expect it to be in relation to the size of the stem. Here again in K2 we can see that occur when I lay this down, the stem and the crossbar, proper placement, spacing on the crossbar, Jack. Capital T, H connection causes the H to tip over as if it's going to fall over on its side. So here we can see where the T stem of both Jack and the Zodiac started exactly the same point, and then the crossbar on the top of the T is touching the H at nearly precisely the same point as it does in the Zodiac's H, causing that H to tip, and you can see the tipping in both of those are identical as far as the hump on the H is concerned. We can see that with this one here as well from K116 by just putting it over here on top of Q24. We can see the spacing between these two almost identical. The H is on, the T stem is just curved slightly in an opposite direction from one another, but they are definitely lining up there. Again, same size, T's exactly the same size, stretch up, reach over to the H, tilt it to the side, happening in both authors' writing. V's show a rightward slant as well, with the right bar being slightly taller than the left bar on the V, and when you bring that down and lay it down inside of the Zodiac's V's, you find that it is right within range, slanting to the right like it does in Jack's writing. Perfect. In the U's, Jack tends to use a tail or a stem on the right side of his U in his uppercase U's. Generally, though, in his lowercase, he uses just the horseshoe shape. Horseshoe shape. Say that 5 times fast. With this particular one in K78 being executed with a tail that comes straight down. I do note that the Zodiac used a majority of U's with tails. However, there were several communications, like in Q13, where there was no tail left. Q61 all the way through, there were no tails used in there. Probably indicates, as we'd stated before, the further an individual gets into writing, the longer they do it, the more apt they are to mess up and use their own form. Putting the capital U, though, over the top of a lowercase u with a tail gives us a good idea of where that tail comes out at. And by doing so, we can see here that with the lowercase u from the Zodiac in comparison to the capital U of Jack, both with a tail, the tails exited at precisely the same exact point. The bottom curve of the U points into the same direction, and the top two stems slant backward to the right into the same degree that the Zodiac's does. Capital W's and lowercase w's are generally done with rounded bottoms. We do see some executions of pointed bottoms in Jack's writing, and we're going to use those as a comparison with the Zodiac's W's because his choice for disguising his W was the pointed W. We can take Q17 right here and lay that over the top of Q109, and what we find here is the spacing between all of these strokes are fairly identical. The midsection's slightly smaller in the Zodiac, but from beginning to end and where the points at the bottom line up would indicate that the spacing relation between these two people was the same. Lowercase w's, the Zodiac did not concern himself with disguising so much, only found a couple of the pointed W's, the rest of them look identical to what you would expect to see from Jack, which is the taller right arm, rounded bottom, slant of the W itself is pretty much dead on within Jack's range. The X's, while we don't have nothing more than 2 strikes on a piece of paper, what we do have is a size relation and a slant relation to the actual placement of those bars. So for that reason, we can take this particular X out of the Zodiac and move it around, and we get a relation on the top that is very similar between these 2 authors. Placement of those bars are identical. That one's a little off. We know that one's on. And that one's a little off. In the Y category, it looks like we've got a bunch of lowercase y's, and that's because both the Zodiac and Jack choose to use a lowercase y construction for capital Y's when they print. They just make the Y large enough to appear as though it's a capital in comparison to the lowercase printing. They both use a leftward slant on the bottom of the Y's tail, and they use a short left arm in comparison to the right side of the stem of the Y that protrudes up taller and higher like the V's and the W's tend to do. We also have that slight curvature in the stem of the Y, which is found inside of the Zodiac's writing. The famous Z, I can pick up many of these Z's right here and just carry them on down to the Zodiac's Z for size and spacing, and find that it's right there within his range. Even the slants of those particular bars from the middle to the top to the bottom line up perfectly with the Zodiac's Z's. Jack likes to use the and sign. His version is usually a angular version, and as you go down into the Zodiacs, what you find is a mad array of all different kinds, some with loops, some without loops, some with inverted loops, some with no loops, no openings at all, look like a plus sign. However, I did find one and sign in the Zodiac's communications, and there may be more, but I did find one where it's made absolutely the same as the way Jack makes his. The cross point or section of the crossbar lines up within range of what you would expect to see, and the size, slant, as you pull it across, the variations there, it's right within Jack's range. Both of the authors tend to use heavy period dots or circle dots for periods and I dots and colons. You can see that down here in the Zodiacs as well, with the colon, the periods being heavy or circular. We were able to pull 2 question marks from Jack's handwriting, and here I just noted where the exit, or I'm sorry, where the entrance into the exit of the question mark occurred, and on the back side where the angular portion occurred between both of these authors, and they both occur at about the same point. This particular question mark out of K31 from Jack, I lined up over one from Q31, or Q13, I'm sorry, from the Zodiac, and what you find there is not only does it line up as far as the slant's concerned, but the shape and the relative overall gestalt is similar. They both use the sun symbol in electrical diagrams to indicate power source, and you see that in the bus bomb diagram from the Zodiac as well as in Jack Tarrance's diagrams. Initially, I was under the impression that the Zodiac did not use a lot of commas, but I wasn't looking for them at first, and after finding them, I thought they were rather large and obnoxious because they were about the size of a letter, if not bigger, which is usually out of character for a comma. And I went into Jack's writing and found that he absolutely makes the same type of comma that is straight with the slant, larger than a typical comma would be expected to be, but identical to what the Zodiac uses in his writings. These links here will take you to the exemplars that have been used throughout this presentation. There's also a link to a photo bucket site that will give you the paper version in the event you are unable to see this clearly to make out the letters and the formations. The paper version will assist you in doing so. I thank you for your time, and I hope that everybody enjoys. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me at Nanette, Nanette, at handwritingdocumentexamination.com.